an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night and went to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 13 to 15. These events take place after the nativity and the visit from the three magi, the three wise men. Joseph, Mary and Jesus become refugees, the central point of the discussion for this week's Christmas special. Welcome to Spare a Thought, the podcast that shines a light on the people, ideas, issues and organisations that are often overlooked or misrepresented in the media. I'm your host, Tom Spare. Christmas, for many of us, is a time of celebration, family gatherings and traditions. We picture the nativity scene, the stable, the shepherds, the star. It's comforting, it's familiar. It's a story that's been told for millennia. But there's another side to this story, one that we don't often talk about. At its heart, the Christmas narrative is about a family fleeing violence, seeking safety in a foreign land. Mary, Joseph, and the infant Jesus were refugees. Mary and Joseph travelled to Bethlehem because of a census. They found no room and were given a stable, and then they had to flee to Egypt to escape King Herod's violence. They depended on the kindness and welcome of strangers. Without that sanctuary, the story we know today would have ended very differently. Today, millions of people around the world are making familiar journeys, fleeing war, persecution, and danger, searching for safety and a chance to rebuild their lives. Many in the surrounding areas of Nazareth, Bethlehem, and the places mentioned in the Bible. And yet, refugees and asylum seekers are often seen as the problem to be managed, rather than people to be welcomed. This episode asks, if one of our oldest and most celebrated stories is fundamentally about displacement and hospitality, what does that mean for how we respond to those seeking sanctuary today? To explore this, I'm joined by our four guests. Rosa Brown from the Welsh Refugee Council, who will share the realities facing refugees and asylum seekers in Wales and the work being done to create a nation of sanctuary. And we'll hear from three chaplains from Cardiff University. Reverend Delyth Liddell, who's the coordinating chaplain and represents the Methodist Church. Reverend Joe Smith, who's the Anglican chaplain. And Father John Patrick Thomas, who is the Catholic chaplain. And they'll reflect on what this story teaches us about welcome, hospitality, and hope. So let's get into it and spare a thought for the topic today of Jesus was a refugee.
Hiya, I'm Rosa and I work for the Welsh Refugee Council. I'm really pleased to be here and be involved in this very special episode of the podcast to talk more about the work that we do here in Wales to make sanctuary work for all. So for me, this work really comes back down to people. Now, I'm incredibly lucky. I work alongside passionate and experienced people who turn up every day to do the exact same thing that I do, which is listening to people's stories and working together to find the best solutions for sanctuary here in Wales. Now, it's not just about hearing these stories, it's about what we choose to do with the information that we know. The safety is something that can so easily be taken for granted. And knowing this, starting from this point, made me really want to work somewhere that helps people rebuild that basic sense of security and that foundation to a safe life, which everyone deserves to have. First off, I think it's really important to say that the landscape for refugees and sanctuary seekers in Wales right now can be real mixed. And this is because we have, on the one hand, the asylum system itself is incredibly stressful thing to experience. Lots of people listening probably don't realise that there have been over 200 changes from the UK government to asylum rules just in the space of the last 10 years. I mean, Can you imagine trying to build a life based on this set of terms and conditions that feel like they're never ending? And, if we go to the most recent proposals from the Home Secretary to review refugee status every few years, really have to ask the question of how anybody is meant to plan for a future under those sorts of conditions. I know that I would find it incredibly stressful and a struggle to really feel settled in a situation like that. But if we look at Wales, we see some reasons to be hopeful here. Because even though the Welsh Government doesn't control immigration, it does control how people will be welcomed in Wales. And with the Nation of Sanctuary approach, we have a really hopeful step in this direction. And this is because this commitment means that people can access English and Welsh classes. It means people can learn about the history of Wales and that they can get support connecting with communities as quickly as possible to really help them start thinking about opportunities like employment and things in those early stages. And the other thing about Nation of Sanctuary is it's about creating these shared experiences together. And that is a huge part of the life that we have at the Welsh Refugee Council. As a team, we've held conversation classes to practice our Cymraeg. And for me, there is nothing more special than learning new things about Wales, a place I call home, with those who now see it in that way too. Especially if you're learning language side by side with someone who speaks Welsh as their fifth or even sixth language. It is a simply incredible thing to experience.
I'm Reverend Delyth Liddell. I'm a Methodist minister and I am coordinating chaplain at Cardiff University. So I'm the Methodist chaplain there, but I kind of do the coordinating between the chaplaincy as a whole and the university systems as a whole. We do all kinds of stuff at the chaplaincy. We're not employed by the university. We are employed by our sending denominations, our sending churches. And so I think that gives us a unique insight to be able to work alongside the university and to offer that pastoral support to staff and students without actually being a part of the institution. I felt very clearly from God that there was a sense of call to do something for God, to work for God, to be a professional Christian, as it were. And I felt that very early. I came into Methodist ministry in my sort of late-ish 20s, and I've been 22 years now in ministry. And I think chaplaincy, what drew me to chaplaincy was the fact that you're walking alongside people in real life. You do that in churches too as a church minister, but you're focused on what's happening in the church as a church minister. As a chaplain, you're focused on what's happening in the community and in the institution like the university. And you're meeting people on a real level playing field. It's their work, it's their business, it's their environment. And I'm able to be there alongside people when things are tough and when we want to celebrate things as well.
Hello, I'm Reverend Joe and I'm an Anglican priest and I am the Anglican chaplain to Cardiff University. What drew me to this work was a desire to be present in people's lives in a real, tangible way, helping people through this liminal, transitory moment where they're figuring out who they are, who they want to be, what they've left behind, and just being the person who's there, present with them in that space to help them on that path and remember what's important and perhaps let go of the things that aren't so important anymore.
Hello, I'm Father John Patrick Thomas and the Roman Catholic chaplain at Cardiff University. I've been in situ since March 2025 at the request of His Grace, the Archbishop of Cardiff Menevia, Mark O'Toole.
When we think about the Christmas story, we often picture the stable, the angels and the shepherds. But at its heart, this is a story about a family who couldn't find shelter and then had to flee their home to escape violence. Why do you think we sometimes overlook this part of the story?
Oh, we do, don't we? I mean, Christmas nativities that you see like in schools and in churches as well. You've got the lovely cute figures. You've got Mary riding on the donkey, which there was never a donkey in the actual narrative in the Bible. And I think we do that because we like to sanitize stuff. We like it to be cute and pretty and sweet and lovely. And I think when we do that, we miss the truth of the story, as you're obviously picking out from that question. One of the things that always makes me quite amused is you sing Silent Night, Holy Night. And you think, well, hey, come on, I've had a baby. It's not a silent night if you're having a baby. It may be a holy thing, but it's certainly not a silent thing. And I think that, the fact that we try to make it all kind of pretty and nice and wrap it up in a really nice gift box really undersells the truth of the grit of the story. I mean, just taking the fact that we have a donkey in every nativity has a donkey in it, and it's never mentioned how Mary and Joseph made their journey, the 95 miles or so that it was from Nazareth to Bethlehem. And even that is an element of sanitizing it when we put a donkey in it, because we don't want to even imagine that somebody would make a heavily pregnant young woman, travel that amount of distance on foot. Surely she would have had a donkey to ride on. Surely there would have been some sort of transport. Maybe it was just a really, really tough journey that they had to make, and that was painful, and that she needed that grit and determination to get through. And I think we miss a part of who Mary is in this if we just plonk her on the top of a donkey and say, there, off you go. We'll zip you down to Bethlehem on the back of a donkey.
Well, this is the thing. It makes her a very passive person. It doesn't really give her any personality or doesn't demonstrate her courage or anything like that. Really, it's a very patriarchal view of the story, I guess.
And then you're right. I think pretty much every nativity would mention that there's no room in the inn, that there'd be an innkeeper somewhere going, no room here. And yet that's it really. I've just done some work with some schools and nativities actually this last couple of weeks. And I think one of the things that I learnt from going into schools was that there are children within our inner city schools here in Cardiff and throughout the country where we have children who have made difficult journeys, whether be they refugees or asylum seekers or just simply economic migrants from countries to get to the UK. They understand what it is to have to make that long journey and to start somewhere afresh and anew. And what I've been impressed with the schools actually is that they're not shying away from that aspect of it. They are saying that there has been a long journey and there is no room at the inn. That sense of, people who do come to our country may find hospitality and welcome, but they may equally find racism and exclusion and find it very difficult to settle into a new community, a new school, a new environment, a new town. And I think that, again, that the actually having this nativity story in schools is actually showing people that is something that the Holy Family faced and were had to deal with, and that can give us strength to deal with the kind of problems and issues that we have in our own lives.
Well, I think we overlook those perhaps more difficult parts of the story because, if we're honest, we mostly only tell the Christmas story through children's nativity plays and, stories of escaping violence and killing of children don't really fit very well within a primary school nativity setting. And at Christmas, we kind of just want to have that cultural moment, that cozy, comfortable moment where we slip into our routines and habits. Perhaps we go back to our parents' house or the family gather together. It's a comfortable, familiar space. And I don't think we always want to be challenged in that space. So we leave those parts out. However, I do think that if you go to a church over the Christmas period, perhaps to a service that's not one of the flagship carol service type things, you will hear these stories and you will be challenged on them and our involvement in them as they go forward into the future.
I think one of the reasons why people don't dwell on the plight of Joseph and Mary and the newborn Jesus fleeing violence is because every single day through the media we are exposed to the hatred, animosity and the divisions within our society towards immigrants that are trying to get into this country. We feel helpless and hopeless because we don't know the answers. And it seems our government doesn't either. At the heart of all of this is indeed poverty. And that is the result of global economics. The reason why people don't want to dwell on that aspect of the Christmas story is because they feel helpless and hopeless, and no one seems to have the answer.
I've had elements of Christianity throughout my life, I suppose, because I went to Church of England primary school and a Catholic secondary school, and always had an interest in discussions about theology and, you know, the relation between that and politics and history and everything. And I think that opportunity to step back and think and find peace and to consider wider issues is something that's often seems to brush up against what is a very noisy world, you know, and, you know, quick to judge and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I think the story in itself, my grandma always used to say, she was a very religious person, and she always used to say, well, it's like the perfect story to tell, you know, to learn from, basically. So Mary, Joseph and Jesus were refugees in Egypt, and they depended on the kindness and welcome of strangers in a foreign land. If they hadn't found safety, Jesus wouldn't have grown up to become the person we celebrate at Christmas. What does that tell us about the importance of welcoming refugees today?
Well, you've just said it, haven't you? It's your grandma was absolutely right. It's the perfect story for showing us the importance of welcoming and being accepting of people. I think one thing that we overlook here as a Christian, it's not only that Mary, Joseph, Jesus were refugees into Egypt, which of course they had to escape Herod, because Herod was killing all the babies under the age of 2. So they literally did have to run for his life. And I think that is to escape that violence. Again, this isn't something you always hear in a nativity story, even in a church. We will try to miss that bit out because it's a little bit but actually, it, as you say, so many of the folks who are fleeing the war-torn situations and the horrendous situations around the world actually are in that situation. They are escaping for their lives. And I think sometimes we don't appreciate that here in the UK. The rhetoric that we hear is that these people are coming over and they're taking our jobs and they're taking, clogging up our services so that we can't get health appointments, etc., etc. But actually, we're not recognizing what they have fled from. What really does it take for somebody to up sticks and move away from everything they've ever known, move away from family, from friends, from their life, their livelihoods, and move halfway across the world in the hope of a better life? Well, it is because things are so bad where they are. You wouldn't do it if things were okay where you were. So I think we miss that. But the other aspect I think we miss is that Jesus was a refugee in another sense, because as Christians, I believe that God became human in Jesus. So God relied on the hospitality of humanity. God relied on the hospitality of Mary to actually allow God to be born within her, and to allow Jesus, the baby, to grow within her and then to be born. God became completely at the mercy of humanity as that tiny baby. That tiny baby that could well have been killed by Herod, but also could have fallen foul of disease or sickness or other violence, or simply, you know, I mean, the survival rate at that time wasn't as great as it is today. We miss the fact that God took that risk too, because God felt that it was going to be worth it to become human and to grow up to be, you know, and ultimately to be killed at the hand of humanity. And I think that is, again, a story that shows us the importance of hope and the importance of working through our own problems and issues, because God has done it. God's been there before us, and God has managed and given us life through it.
So coming back to the theme of today's episode, which is Jesus was a refugee, I feel like it really, really speaks to an idea that is timeless. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't really matter if you're coming at it from a faith perspective or simply a human perspective, but it's about a story of a family fleeing danger and being one of the oldest stories that we share. And for us at the Welsh Refugee Council, this question of the moral imperative behind our work is a pretty simple one. So when someone turns up at your door in need, you help. Now, that's not because you're a saint, and it's certainly not because you have all the answers, but you help because you can recognize yourself in them, and you recognize that their fear could be your fear, which also means that, you know, that their hope could be your hope too. And I was lucky enough to attend an event in Swansea that was celebrating Ukrainian communities in Wales, and someone shared a story that really stuck with me. Now, they said that the first time that they truly felt safe in Wales was when a stranger smiled at them on the street. Now, this might not sound like a huge gesture to lots of us. I am literally talking about someone smiling at someone else. But this person said that in that one moment, they felt really welcomed by another human being. And it really reminded me that, you know, when we talk about welcome, we're not just talking about policy and politics. Those things have those kind of role to play, of course, but we're also talking about the small daily acts that we can all do to show up for each other and really say, you belong here. And one of the great things about here in Wales is that we've got a real deep history of doing exactly this. And this goes back, you know, from the kinder transport children who found safety here during the war to the communities who continue to step forward today. And lots of us might ask ourselves, you know, like, what would I have done back then? Like, what role would have I played to help? Maybe a different question we could be asking is, what can I do now for the people who are still out there looking for safety today?
Obviously, there's lots of hospitality involved in the Christmas story across the two Gospels where we find it. There's a lot of relying on other people for their generosity. There's a lot of inviting people in and seeing the gifts that they've got, the things that they bring, and also the things that they have to say to us. There's a lot of people appearing unexpectedly, and there's and welcoming those people and not rejecting them and hearing the story that they've got to tell. But I think the whole gospel message, the whole message of the Bible even, is to do with welcoming refugees, welcoming strangers, about not setting up an us and them divide, about being friendly and hospitable to the people who cross our paths, who are in need of our help. When asked what was the most important law in the Bible, Jesus said the most important commandment is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength, and love your neighbour as yourself. And when he was asked who that means, who is my neighbour, he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, with which I'm sure we're quite familiar. But it's this story of finding friendship and neighbourliness in the most unexpected of places, as somebody receives that hospitality, that care and that love from somebody who they considered their enemy. Turns out they were their neighbour, and that was the person who they were to show love to. And it's quite easy to see how refugees and asylum seekers in our media landscape are painted as our enemy, They're painted as the one who is taking everything that is yours, which is simply not true. But the story of the Bible points us in the direction that we should love those people. We shouldn't be tricked into hating them because they're people made in the image of God, people in need of help, people in need of security, people in need of friendship, and people in need of love. The Christmas story is obviously all about welcome and hospitality and relying on the goodwill of others and extending your goodwill to others. But even more than that, it's about something that we would call incarnation. And that word incarnation means God becoming human, being incarnate as a human being. God being with us, Emmanuel, God with us. And God could have just continued to speak from the heavens, to shout edicts from on high about how God wants us to live. And that happens throughout the Bible, and I'm sure happens even today as well. God speaks through people, or people speak on behalf of God. We see it in the prophets and in John the Baptist, where somebody will speak to the nation, to God's chosen people, to say, look, we've gone wrong, we've gone astray, we've put our priorities in the wrong place. And normally it's to say, we're not dealing with issues of justice, social justice. We're not caring for the least and the lost and the downtrodden. So God could have continued to do that, but instead God decides to be with us, to become like us, to become one of us, incarnate. And I think that's a really valuable thing to think about when we think of what it is to be a Christian, but also what it is to be a good person in the world. Because we can pray for people's well-being, we can have good intentions for people, but really, being with is so much more valuable than any of that. Part of our journey of discipleship, that is the journey of being a Christian, is about being Christ-like. And that meant being with. It meant being present to stand against injustices that we would see around us. It meant being, and it means being, present with people to welcome them into society, into community, to restore people's dignity. It means being with, sitting with, eating with, journeying with, being present to all of those people. And sometimes that's really difficult, but that is what it is to be Christ-like in the world today.
So I think this idea of having a shift in mindset and moving beyond the ideas of treating sanctuary seekers and refugees as problems instead of people really comes straight back to the basics of how we treat people. And I think it's remembering that refugees and sanctuary seekers are people first and foremost, which, people who have dreams and skills and stories away from the statistics that lots of us will see on the front pages. And a lot of this wider coverage that treats people as this problem to be solved rather than people who can really be supported to thrive. And one example of this is that lots of us will have heard about how much the asylum system costs and the impact of it on taxpayers. But what will be missing from these discussions is that currently, by law, asylum seekers are not allowed to work for the first 12 months of their claim. Now, this means that people aren't allowed to earn and pay taxes, even if they desperately want to. And even after this year has passed, asylum seekers can only apply for work from a very narrow list of jobs, which currently no longer reflects the needs that we have as a country. Now, to me, this doesn't really sound like an ideal option that suits anybody. So if you come to any of our offices and chat to our caseworkers, you'll hear about the people who they meet and work with every day, the doctors, teachers, the nurses and journalists. And from these people, they will hear the same stories that sanctuary seekers are not here because they want anything for free, that they're ready and willing to contribute. And yet it's incredibly frustrating that we have a system that is keeping these people locked out. And it really shows us that if we were to look at things from the other side and recognise the potential that people have, we'd really see that these are the people who we exactly need. These are people who are capable and willing to strengthen our NHS and our care sector and our rural communities. And this is why we are pushing for policy changes that really help everyone, like creating an immigration salary list that actually reflects the jobs that we struggle to fill in Wales. Because we know that when people can work and contribute and they can feel valued, this conversation stops being one that becomes about us and them, and it really becomes a story of shared benefit and how we can all help each other.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode as well was this very bizarre situation where people are sort of saying that they're Christian, but then not being welcoming, and using God as a way and their religion as a way to reject, to say, well, you're not part of our story, so we can't accept you, sort of thing. We need to welcome all, because we could easily be in that situation or a very complicated situation and we would need help. So it's only natural that you support other people too.
Yeah, I don't know whether you've seen, but the JPIT, which is the Joint Public Issues Team, are, and I think the Church of England has used it. It's the Bus Stop Nativity by Andrew Gadd, and it's a wonderful picture of the Holy Family with their halos around their heads at a bus stop, and a whole bunch of people around them. There's a Tesco carrier bag at their feet. There's somebody desperately trying to flag down a bus. You can see they're on line 33, and it brings it home that this is now too. This is people now are vulnerable, need welcome, need our support. And if somebody hadn't given Mary somewhere to have that baby, even though it was the stable, as we're told, if Mary and Joseph hadn't managed to escape into Egypt, if people hadn't been hospitable and supported them, where would we be today in terms of faith in God? We wouldn't have had that. As you've said already, we wouldn't have had the amazing person and the amazing example that Jesus sets us. And Jesus, his adult ministry was all about love, and the greatest commandment is to love God and to love your neighbor. Who is your neighbor? Your neighbor is everybody and anybody who is in need. That's, I think, what we see in this wonderful, magical nativity story.
Welcoming those from other parts of the world, whether they're refugees or not, is so important. We can always fall into the danger of looking through the same cultural lens. If it wasn't for the cross-fertilization of peoples from different cultures, backgrounds, languages, we wouldn't know the diversity and capability that humanity itself can achieve, unlocking potentials that were hitherto unknown. There is a richness to be found in the melting pot of cultures today. Not all world views are the same, and thank God for that. It also enables people from those backgrounds as refugees to find a safe haven, to settle down, to realize their hopes and dreams. It gives them a sense of stability and purpose in life. Welcoming refugees today is also a sure sign of solidarity with the brokenness of humanity and a desire to heal, to make whole, to build community, to disarm hatred, violence, and suspicion. No, the importance of welcoming refugees speaks to the heart of love for our neighbour, for each other, and, in doing so, is a profound expression of self-love.
You work with people from all over the world, many far from home. How do you see the themes of welcome and hospitality playing out in everyday campus life, and what can we learn from that?
In the university, we work with people from all over the world, yes, but we also work with people who are in that transitory moment. Perhaps they've moved away from home for the first time, whether it is from a different country or from within the UK, and they're in a space of exploration and excitement, but also unknown. And for some people, it's quite anxiety-inducing. It's quite terrifying. And for us, hospitality is a huge part of our ministry on the campus. We try to create a space where everybody is welcome, not just that everybody feels welcome, but that everybody is welcome. We try to create an inclusive space and a comfortable space where people can come and know that they're not going to be judged, know that they're not even going to be asked any intrusive questions or anything like that. They can come and they can be who they need to be in that time. And our hope is that when people are comfortable in that space, comfortable with us as chaplains, they will also be comfortable to come to us when they really need the help and the support, perhaps when those searching questions of spirituality come to them, and they do come to most of us at some point or other. Or maybe when they're in a moment of trouble or anxiety or stress, we want them to know that we are people who are there for them, we're people who are safe for them, we're people who love them, and people whose only agenda is their flourishing and their growth. And it's been so important to create that space of hospitality so that people know that we're not out to get them. We're not out to push a religious agenda on them. We're there for them to flourish, for them to make the most of their time at the university and to become the people who they are, to be the best version of themselves.
I think one of the best things we do at the chaplaincy is our £1 lunch, which happens every Tuesday. And I know you were a regular attender at one point, Tom. And it really is, you've got people from, staff members from IT at the university sitting alongside members of the Christian Union. You've got people from maths, students from maths sitting alongside music students. You've got law students chatting to our ISOC. It's incredible the differences that you can have and friendships that can happen out of that. At the chaplaincy, as I say, we're all about offering that space for people to come and meet others. One of the things we battle to get across as chaplains is that although we come from a religious background, you don't have to be religious to engage with the chaplaincy. And when people understand that, then that really brings a rich variety of people's experiences into the building. And as I say, you can sit there with people who may be Muslim, or people who may be Jewish, or people who may be Christian, or people who may have no faith at all. But you can all be having a really kind of energizing conversation about somebody's research or something somebody learnt in a class, and you cross. That's not only across who we are as people, but also who we are and what we're doing in our own academic fields. So we can learn a lot from each other. And I think where we can offer spaces for people to learn from each other, that fosters acceptance, that fosters understanding, and that fosters a sense of belonging, even when you are different to somebody else.
A simple way of entering into the spirit of Christmas is to see the very person in front of us as another self, and to show that person the same love and respect that we would expect for ourselves.
And I think that thing of that hope is something that's I think people are searching for more and more, I would say, in very uncertain times in particular. So I think that element of hope is something I often forget about, because I get to the end of the year and I'm just relieved I have a bit of time off rather than thinking about the wider message.
I think you're right. At the moment, the world feels quite precarious, and I think people are looking for hope. And I think what faith in God gives you is an understanding that whatever happens, you've got somebody there with you. That's not to say things are going to turn out fine. Hope isn't about hoping that everything's going to be like rosy again and everything's going to be all brilliant again. Hope is about knowing that you've got a strong conviction that whatever happens, you've got somebody with you. God's with you. God is with you. And that for me is the true story of Christmas. You know, Emmanuel, God is with us. That is the baby. That is God becoming human. And for God to be with us in that kind of, in our everyday lives, whatever we're doing and whoever we are, and however tough it is. And even if it ends in death, because like life isn't always rosy, let's face it, just to know that somebody's with you through it all is the hope that I have.
So for people who are out there listening and thinking, what can I actually do? How can I help? The really good news is that small actions can make a huge difference. On a practical level, by supporting our winter appeal, it's one of the most direct ways that you can help sanctuary seekers in Wales this year. So this winter, we've seen families come to us without warm food or clothing, and thanks to public donations, we can help them with blankets and emergency food vouchers. One mum told us that the voucher meant she could cook for her child a warm meal and that they would sleep soundly through the night. And that's an example of, the real difference that your support can make. As well as through donations, communities and faith groups can offer this idea and spirit of welcome and closer through different ways. So inviting people to local events or helping someone navigate a bus system, even just saying hello or smiling to someone new in your area. These are all gestures that could seem really small, but what they do is that they build confidence and they build this community and this idea of welcome too. So for anyone listening who wants to get further involved with us, all details can be found at www.wrc.wales. In terms of seeing real change, we need a system that helps people integrate right from day one. That's what Wales is trying to model through the Nation of Sanctuary Plan. And if we saw the UK government move towards this approach too, we'd have that recognition of solutions that are already at work here in Wales. Solutions that are based on humanity, solutions based on fairness, and this belief that when you give people a chance, they can really thrive. So for me, I would want to see a Wales where sanctuary seekers are welcomed, not here as guests, but as future neighbours. A Wales that chooses dignity over division, and one that continues this very long tradition we've seen of opening its doors when people need it the most. Thank you, Tom, for inviting me to be part of this episode. Nadolig llawen, a heddwch a fair, a Merry Christmas and peace to you all.
I want to thank my guests for sharing their insights today. Rosa Brown from the Welsh Refugee Council and the chaplains from Cardiff University, Reverend Delyth Liddell, Reverend Joe Smith, and Father John Patrick Thomas. If you want to support the work of the Welsh Refugee Council, you can contribute by giving to their winter appeal. The link is in the show notes. Next week, I'll be releasing the third instalment of Curly's War, taken from my grandfather's self-published book of the same name. The podcast and the book follow my grandfather's life during World War II as a Royal Marine and a commando, including his training, involvement in D-Day, and the liberation of the Netherlands. Spare of Thought is a Be the Change Media Network production. I'm your host, Tom Spare. I'd like to wish you and your family Nadolig llawen, Merry Christmas. Thanks for listening.